The night air in Yuma felt like breathing through a wool blanket. Even at 11 p.m., the heat from the day still radiated off the asphalt as I stepped out of my beat-up Honda. The warehouse loomed ahead, a plain rectangular building with metal siding that had seen better days. Nothing special about it, just another place desperate enough to hire someone willing to work nights. I wiped sweat from my forehead and headed toward the entrance. The job posting had been vague. Night shift warehouse associate. Competitive pay. Minimal experience required. After getting laid off from my last gig, I wasn't exactly in a position to be picky. The front office light glowed yellow through dusty blinds. I knocked twice on the metal door, the sound echoing across the empty parking lot. A moment later, the door swung open. Tyler Martinez, a guy in his late 30s, stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand. His face looked tired in a way that suggested years of night shifts. "That's me," I said. "Marcos Rodriguez." He didn't offer to shake hands. "Follow me." The inside of the warehouse wasn't much cooler than outside. Industrial fans hummed in the corners, pushing hot air around without actually cooling anything. Rows of metal shelving stretched toward the back, loaded with boxes and crates of various sizes. A small office sat in the corner with windows overlooking the warehouse floor. "You'll be handling inventory and some light cleaning," Marcos said, leading me through the main area. "Shipments come in during the day, we process at night. Pretty straightforward." He handed me a time card and showed me where to clock in. Everything seemed normal enough, until he pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "These are the rules," he said, handing it to me. "Follow them exactly." I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was neat but pressed hard into the page, like whoever wrote it wanted to make sure the ink wouldn't fade. 1. Keep loading bay doors closed at all times between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. 2. If a woman asks for water, ignore her. Do not speak to her or acknowledge her presence. 3. Do not accept job applications from anyone who comes after midnight. 4. Do not accept packages from any mailman. We do not receive mail at night. 5. Do not accept food from anyone claiming to be from local restaurants. "Is this for real?" I asked, looking up from the paper. Marcos didn't smile. "Follow the rules and you'll be fine. I'll be in the office handling paperwork most of the night. Any questions about inventory procedures? What's with these rules? Some kind of joke for the new guy? Just follow them." He turned and walked toward the office. "I'll be back to check on you in a few hours." I watched him go, then looked back at the list. This had to be some weird hazing ritual. I'd worked warehouse jobs before. There was always some guy who thought it was hilarious to mess with the new employees. I folded the paper and stuffed it in my back pocket. The first few hours went by smoothly enough. I familiarized myself with the inventory system, checked stock against the shipping manifests, and swept the main floor. The work was mindless but kept me busy. Every now and then I glanced toward the office where I could see Marcos hunched over a computer. By 2 in the morning, the temperature inside had become brutal. Sweat soaked through my t-shirt, and the fans just pushed around hot air. The thermometer on the wall read 92 degrees. I drank from my water bottle, but the lukewarm liquid did little to cool me down. I remembered the rush of cooler air I'd felt earlier when a late delivery truck had departed through the loading bay. The massive doors opened to the back of the property, facing an empty stretch of desert. Maybe opening them just a crack would let in some relief. I glanced toward the office. Marcos was still inside, focused on his computer screen. What harm could a little fresh air do? I walked to the loading bay doors, my footsteps echoing across the concrete floor. The control panel had 2 large buttons, one red, one green. I pressed the green one, and the door rumbled to life, rising slowly from the ground. I only let it go up about a foot, just enough to let in some air. Immediately, a cooler breeze washed over me. I stood there enjoying the relief for about 10 seconds before I heard it. "Tyler." The voice drifted in from the darkness outside, soft and melodic, yet something about it made the hair on my arms stand up. "Tyler, help me." I froze. The voice had an odd quality to it, like someone speaking through water, with a strange echo that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It didn't sound fully human. "Tyler, I know you're there. My name." It knew my name. How could it know my name? The rules flashed in my mind. Keep loading bay doors closed at all times between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. I lunged for the red button, slapping it hard with my palm. The door began to lower too slowly for my liking. As the gap narrowed, the voice changed, stretching and distorting into something that sounded like several voices speaking at once. "Tyler, don't leave me out here. Tyler, Tyler." The door finally shut with a heavy thud. My hands shook as I fumbled with the manual lock, sliding it into place. I backed away, heart pounding in my chest. What the hell was that? I rushed back to my workstation, snatching up the paper with the rules. Reading them again, they no longer seemed like a joke. If someone had gone to this much trouble for a prank, they deserved an Oscar. For the next 4 hours, I stayed as far from the loading bay as possible. Every few minutes, I checked the doors to make sure they were still secure. I tried to focus on inventory, but my mind kept replaying that voice calling my name. At 6:30, Marcos emerged from the office. "How'd it go?" he asked, his expression giving nothing away. I hesitated, unsure what to say. Would he think I was crazy if I told him about the voice? Or was that the point, to see if I'd admit to breaking the rules? "Fine," I managed to say. "No problems." He studied me for a long moment. "You sure about that?" "Yeah, all good." Marcos nodded slowly. "See you tomorrow night then." As I walked to my car, the rising sun finally bringing relief from the heat, I realized I was still clutching the paper with the rules. I carefully folded it and placed it in my wallet. Whatever game this was, I wasn't taking chances anymore. Those rules weren't a joke, and I had a feeling I'd learn why soon enough. I didn't sleep well after my first night at the warehouse. The voice that had called my name through the loading bay door kept playing on repeat in my head. I tried telling myself it was just the wind, or maybe some local kids playing a prank, but I knew better. Whatever had spoken to me knew my name without me ever stepping outside. The following evening, I arrived at the warehouse 20 minutes early. The sun was just setting, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple. I sat in my car, staring at the warehouse building, wondering if I should just drive away and never come back. But the reality of my empty bank account made that decision for me. I needed this job, supernatural weirdness or not. I'd printed out Marcos's list of rules and taped it firmly to my clipboard. What had seemed like a strange joke yesterday now felt like a survival manual. Inside, the warehouse was quiet except for the constant hum of those industrial fans. Marcos was in his office, typing away at his computer. He gave me a brief nod when I clocked in, but didn't say anything about the previous night. I wondered if he knew I'd opened the loading bay door, if he'd somehow seen me break rule number 1. "Same tasks as yesterday," he said, handing me a stack of inventory sheets. "I'll be leaving early tonight. Got some supplier meetings in the morning." "You're leaving me alone." I tried to keep the panic out of my voice. Marcos studied me for a second. "Follow the rules, and you'll be fine." By 11:30, Marcos had packed up his things and headed out, leaving me alone in the warehouse. I triple-checked all the doors, making sure everything was locked and secure. The loading bay doors were firmly shut, and I had no intention of opening them again. I kept myself busy with inventory, methodically counting boxes and checking them against the manifest. Physical work helped keep my mind off the fact that I was alone in a place where something unnatural had called my name the night before. Around midnight, I was organizing some newly arrived packages near the front windows when I heard it. A woman's voice, soft and desperate, coming from outside. "Please, I need water." I froze, clipboard clutched tightly in my hands. Rule number 2 flashed in my mind. If a woman asks for water, ignore her. Do not speak to her or acknowledge her presence. "Please, I can see you in there. I'm so thirsty." The voice sounded genuinely distressed. Human instinct told me to help, to at least see who was out there. I walked over to the security desk and checked the monitor connected to the external cameras. A woman stood under the harsh glow of the parking lot lights. Her clothes were tattered and dirty, hanging off her gaunt frame. She looked like she might have been wandering the desert for days, but something about her was wrong. Her skin seemed too pale, almost glowing against the night, and her movements were strange, jerky, and uncoordinated, like someone learning how to use their limbs for the first time. "Water, please. I'm dying of thirst." I watched as she shuffled toward the glass entrance doors, pressing her face against them. That's when I saw her eyes, completely black. No whites, no irises, just bottomless pools of darkness. My stomach twisted into knots. She began to pound on the glass, her mouth opening in what looked like silent screams between her audible pleas. "I know you can hear me. Please help me." Despite everything wrong about her appearance, I felt my hand moving toward the door lock. Something about her desperation pulled at me, an almost magnetic urge to help her, to give her what she needed. My fingers were inches from the handle when I caught myself. "The rules. Follow the rules." I yanked my hand back, stepping away from the door. The woman's face contorted with rage, an expression too extreme for normal human features. "I see you. I know you're there." Her voice was changing now, a harsh edge creeping in where desperation had been seconds before. I remembered the loading bay incident from the previous night, how that voice had transformed when I refused to respond. I backed away, keeping my eyes on the security monitor. The woman was throwing herself against the glass now, her body moving with impossible force for someone so frail-looking. The doors rattled in their frames but held firm. I needed to get away from her voice, from the compulsion I felt to help her. The walk-in cooler, it was the most secure room in the warehouse besides the office, with thick insulated walls and a heavy door that locked from the inside. I sprinted across the warehouse floor, the woman's screams growing louder and more distorted with each step. By the time I reached the cooler, her voice barely sounded human anymore, a grinding metallic sound that no human vocal cords could produce. I yanked open the cooler door, slipped inside, and pulled it shut behind me, sliding the internal lock into place. The temperature inside was a shock after the heat of the warehouse, but I welcomed it. The thick walls muffled the sounds outside, but I could still hear her, or it, screaming. The noises that came through the insulated walls were horrifying. What had started as human pleas for help had morphed into something that sounded like metal being torn apart, punctuated by high-pitched wails that hurt my ears even through the barrier. I pressed my hands over my ears and sat on an empty shelf, my back against the cold wall. 20 minutes. That's how long I sat there, shivering in the cold, listening to those inhuman sounds gradually fade. Eventually, silence fell over the warehouse. I waited another 10 minutes to be sure before I unlocked the cooler door and cautiously stepped out. The warehouse was quiet again, just the sound of the fans pushing hot air around. I moved slowly toward the security desk, checking the monitors. The parking lot was empty. No sign of the woman. I approached the front doors cautiously, half expecting her to jump out from some hidden corner. The glass was intact, despite the force she'd been applying. But something else caught my eye. Handprints. Dozens of wet handprints covered the glass doors on the outside, as if she'd pressed her palms against every inch of the surface. I touched the glass from my side. It was bone dry despite the marks. The night outside was clear and arid, typical desert conditions with no sign of rain or moisture. I stepped back, staring at those handprints. They shouldn't exist in this dry environment. There was nothing out there that could have made them, nothing natural anyway. I returned to my inventory tasks, but kept glancing at the front doors throughout the night. The handprints remained until around 5 in the morning, when they began to evaporate, disappearing one by one until the glass was clear again, as if nothing had happened. When 6 a.m. finally arrived, I clocked out with shaking hands. 2 nights, 2 encounters with something that defied explanation. As I walked to my car in the early morning light, I pulled out my phone to look for other job listings in the area, but then I stopped. The pay here was better than anything else I'd find, and despite the terror of the night, I'd survived by following the rules. I looked back at the warehouse, squinting in the morning sunlight. In the daylight, it was just a building again, plain, ordinary, with no hint of the horrors it contained after dark. I wondered how many others had worked here before me, how many had broken the rules, and what had happened to them. I got in my car and started the engine. Against my better judgment, I knew I'd be back again tonight. After driving away from the warehouse that morning, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop screen. My finger hovered over the send button for a resignation email I'd drafted. I could still hear the inhuman wailing of that woman, if she was even a woman, from the night before. Those black eyes and wet handprints stuck in my mind. But I didn't click send. I needed the money, and bizarrely, part of me wanted to understand what was happening at that warehouse. I'd survived 2 nights by following the rules. Maybe I could handle whatever came next. That evening, I pulled into the parking lot 20 minutes early again. The same routine was becoming a habit, checking my car mirrors repeatedly, scanning the empty lot for movement before getting out. I'd printed another copy of the rules and kept it in my pocket alongside the original list from Marcos. The warehouse looked exactly as it had the previous nights, plain and unremarkable in the fading daylight. Hard to believe it was home to whatever had called my name from outside the loading bay or pounded on the glass doors with impossible strength. Inside, the place was empty. Marcos had mentioned he wouldn't be in tonight either, leaving me alone again. I clocked in, checked all the doors twice, and got to work. The mundane tasks of inventory management felt comforting. Counting boxes, checking manifests, organizing shipments. Normal work in an abnormal place. I'd come prepared tonight. Extra bottles of water, a decent meal packed in my bag, and I'd downloaded some podcasts to my phone to break the silence. I also brought a small flashlight that fit in my pocket just in case. By 1 in the morning, I'd settled into a rhythm. The warehouse was hot as usual, but I'd gotten used to it. The security monitors showed nothing unusual outside, and I kept glancing at them between tasks. I was restocking some office supplies on the back shelves when I heard it, the front door buzzer, sounding repeatedly in quick succession. My whole body tensed. I set down the box of pens I was holding and moved quickly to the security desk. The monitor showed a man standing at the front entrance, wearing standard work clothes, jeans, boots, and a button-up shirt. From a distance, he looked normal enough, but something about his posture made my skin crawl. He stood too straight, his arms hanging at his sides at precise angles like a mannequin. I grabbed my clipboard with the rules taped to it and approached the glass doors cautiously, staying well back from the entrance. Rule number 3. Do not accept job applications from anyone who comes after midnight. As I got closer, I could see more details that didn't add up. His head was tilted slightly to the right at an angle that looked painful. His face showed no expression at all, not curiosity, not impatience, nothing. He just stared straight ahead. The buzzer sounded again, though I didn't see him press it. "Hello," he said through the glass, his voice flat and emotionless. "I would like to inquire about job openings at this facility." Each word came out with the same tone and volume, like someone reading from a script for the first time. His mouth moved wrong too, opening and closing slightly out of sync with the words I was hearing. "We don't have any positions available," I called back, keeping my distance from the door. He didn't react to my response at all. He just stood there, perfectly still, for exactly 30 seconds by the clock on the wall. Then, as if someone had pressed play on a paused recording, "Hello? I would like to inquire about job openings at this facility." Word for word, same inflection, same robotic delivery. I felt a chill despite the warehouse heat. "Like I said, we don't have any openings. You need to leave." Again, no acknowledgement. His eyes didn't blink, not once. They just stayed fixed on some point beyond me, never focusing directly on my face. 30 more seconds passed. "Hello, I would like to inquire about job openings at this facility." I backed away slightly. This was worse than the loading bay voice or the water woman in some ways. Those had been clearly supernatural from the start. This thing was trying to look human and failing in subtle, wrong ways that made my brain scream that something wasn't right. "There are no jobs here," I said louder. "Go away." Another 30 seconds of silence. His head slowly rotated to face me directly, the movement too smooth, like a security camera panning. "Hello, I would like to inquire about job openings at this facility." I noticed other details now. He never shifted his weight, never fidgeted, no chest movement from breathing, just that awful, patient stillness as he waited exactly 30 seconds between each identical request. For 15 minutes, I watched this cycle repeat. The same words, the same unnatural pause, the same mechanical delivery. I tried ignoring him, but each time the silence was broken by his monotone question, my nerves wound tighter. What would happen if I said yes? If I told him there was a job opening? The thought made me feel sick. On his 30th repetition of the question, I finally snapped. "There are no jobs. There will never be jobs. Get out of here." For the first time, he reacted, but not to my words. As if responding to some timer I couldn't see, he pivoted with military precision, turning exactly 180 degrees. Then he walked away into the darkness, each step the same length as the last, arms swinging at precise angles. I watched on the security camera as he marched across the parking lot until he reached the edge of the camera's range, where he simply continued walking straight into the desert darkness until I couldn't see him anymore. I stood at the security desk, trying to calm my breathing. This was the third night, the third rule tested. Whatever these things were, they seemed to be working their way through Marcos's list methodically. The thought made me check the remaining rules again. 4. Do not accept packages from any mailman. We do not receive mail at night. 5. Do not accept food from anyone claiming to be from local restaurants. What would tomorrow night bring? A mailman or a food delivery? I wasn't eager to find out, but I also knew I'd be back. Each encounter left me more curious, more determined to understand what was happening here. For the rest of my shift, I stayed near the security desk, watching the monitors for any sign of the mechanical job applicant returning. He didn't come back, but I couldn't shake the memory of his blank stare and those perfectly timed, identical questions. When my shift finally ended at 6, I clocked out and hurried to my car. The sun was just beginning to lighten the horizon, burning away the night's strangeness like fog. In the growing daylight, it was easier to question what I'd seen. Maybe lack of sleep was making me paranoid. Maybe this was all an elaborate psychological test Marcos had designed. But I knew better. Those things weren't human. The rules existed for a reason, and tomorrow night, I'd need to be ready for whatever came next. I didn't bother with the resignation email when I got home that morning. The reality had sunk in. I needed this job, and I was getting pretty good at following the rules. Plus, I was making mental notes about these strange encounters that gave me something to focus on beyond my fear. Sleep came easier than expected, probably because exhaustion had finally caught up to me. I even dreamed about the warehouse, though in my dreams the entities couldn't get to me as long as I stayed in the center of the building. I woke up wondering if there was any truth to that. When I pulled into the parking lot that evening, I sat in my car for a few minutes, staring at the plain metal building. Nothing about its exterior hinted at the weirdness inside. A couple of trucks were parked near the loading bay, regular delivery vehicles that would be gone before my shift started. Everything looked normal in the dying light. I checked my phone, 10 minutes early again. I'd made a habit of arriving before sunset, when the world still felt safe and ordinary. I patted my pocket, feeling the folded paper with the rules. By now I'd memorized them, but having the physical list gave me comfort. Rule number 4, I muttered to myself. Do not accept packages from any mailman. We do not receive mail at night. If the pattern held, tonight would bring the mailman. The thought made my stomach twist, but I'd survived 3 nights already. I could handle one more. Inside, the warehouse was as empty as I expected. Marcos had mentioned he wouldn't be back for a few days, which left me alone again with whatever decided to visit tonight. I clocked in and did my now standard routine of checking every door, making sure everything was locked tight. The first few hours passed quietly. I sorted inventory, checked manifests, and tried to keep my mind occupied with work. I'd brought headphones tonight, playing music quietly while I moved through the shelves. Not so loud that I couldn't hear if something tried to get in, but enough to break the oppressive silence. By 2:30, I'd almost convinced myself that maybe tonight would be different. Maybe whatever controlled these entities had given up. I'd just finished organizing a shipment of office supplies in the back section of the warehouse when my music cut out mid-song. My phone wasn't dead. The screen showed it was still playing, but no sound came through my headphones. That's when I heard it, a sharp rhythmic knocking from the front entrance. I froze, listening. The knocking came again. Harder this time, more insistent. Moving quietly, I made my way to the security desk where I could see the entrance monitor. A man in what looked like a postal uniform stood at the glass doors. He was tall, wearing a crisp blue shirt, dark pants, and a cap that shadowed his face. In his arms, he carried a large package. The uniform looked authentic enough from this distance. Official patches, proper colors. But something about the way he stood seemed off. Too straight, too still between knocks. "No mail at night," I whispered, remembering the rule. The knocking became pounding, his fist hammering against the glass with force that should have hurt his hand. I glanced at the clock. 3:12 in the morning. No legitimate mail carrier would be delivering anything at this hour. "Hello," he called out, his voice carrying clearly through the glass. "I have an urgent delivery that requires immediate signature." His voice sounded normal at first, professional, a bit impatient. But there was an undertone to it, something hard to place that made the hair on my arms stand up. I stayed hidden behind the security desk, watching the monitor. I had no intention of going anywhere near those doors. "I know someone's in there. I can see the lights," he shouted, banging again. "This package is marked urgent. Federal regulations require you to accept it." I knew that was nonsense. No postal regulations required accepting packages at 3 in the morning. This was another test, like the water woman and the job applicant. On the monitor, I could see him shift the package in his arms, and that's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The package moved, not just from him adjusting his grip, but from within, like something inside was shifting around. The sides of the box bulged outward in places, then deflated, almost like it was breathing. The mailman seemed unconcerned, continuing to pound on the glass. "This is your final notice. Refusal to accept federal mail is a criminal offense." His voice had changed slightly, an edge creeping in that hadn't been there before. His movements were becoming less coordinated too, more aggressive. He kicked the door, the sound echoing through the warehouse. I needed a better vantage point where I could still see him but remain hidden. I moved away from the security desk toward a stack of pallets near the middle of the warehouse floor. From there, I could see both the entrance and the security monitor while staying out of sight. The mailman's behavior was deteriorating rapidly. He began pacing in front of the doors, his movements becoming jerky and unnatural. The package in his arms continued to shift and bulge. "You are interfering with official United States Postal Service business," he screamed, his voice rising to an unnatural pitch. "Open this door immediately or face prosecution." He slammed his body against the glass now, no longer even pretending to be a professional delivery person. His hat had fallen off, revealing greasy hair plastered to his scalp. His uniform, which had looked crisp on the monitor, now appeared too perfect, not a single wrinkle or fold where there should have been from normal movement. The package in his arms lurched violently, nearly causing him to drop it. He clutched it tighter, and I swore I heard something squeal from inside. "I know you're in there. Take your delivery," he screamed, his face contorted with rage. "You can't hide. I'll wait all night if I have to." Something about his threat made me think of the walk-in cooler where I'd hidden from the water woman. It seemed like the safest place to wait this out, away from the sight of those glass doors and whatever was in that package. I crept toward the back of the warehouse, keeping low behind shelving units. The mailman continued his tirade, his voice becoming more distorted with each passing minute. "Refusing federal mail is punishable by imprisonment. Do you want to go to jail? Open the door." I reached the cooler door and slipped inside, pulling it shut behind me. The heavy door cut off much of the sound, but I could still hear muffled banging and shouting. The cool air was a stark contrast to the warehouse heat, making me shiver as I sat on the same shelf I'd used 2 nights before. Through the small window in the cooler door, I could see part of the warehouse floor but not the entrance. I checked my phone, 3:26. I wondered how long this would last. The muffled pounding continued, occasionally punctuated by what sounded like the mailman throwing his entire body against the doors. I tried to imagine what would happen if I actually opened the door and accepted that package. Whatever was inside was alive, or at least moving. The thought made me press myself further back against the cooler wall. Time passed slowly in the cold. I checked my phone periodically, 30 minutes, then 45, then an hour. The pounding and shouting continued the entire time, though it seemed to be getting less coordinated, more frantic. The threats evolved from legal consequences to personal ones. "I'll find you when you leave. I know your name. I know where you live." His voice, even muffled through the cooler door, sounded less human with each passing minute. At 4:32, the noise suddenly stopped. I waited in the silence, not trusting it. 10 minutes passed with no sound from outside. After 20 minutes of quiet, I cautiously opened the cooler door and stepped out. The warehouse was silent except for the familiar hum of the industrial fans. I approached the security desk carefully, checking the monitors. The parking lot was empty, no sign of the mailman. Slowly, cautiously, I made my way to the front entrance. Through the glass doors, I could see the empty parking lot. No package, no mailman. But on the ground outside were muddy boot prints leading from the doors across the parking lot. I used the external camera controls to pan and follow the trail. The boots prints marched in a straight line across the asphalt, continued onto the dirt at the edge of the property, and then simply stopped, as if whoever or whatever had made them had disappeared into thin air or been plucked from the ground. The rest of my shift passed without incident. I stayed busy with inventory work, constantly checking the security monitors and jumping at small noises. By 6 a.m. I was exhausted but alive. 4 nights, 4 entities, 4 rules tested. I clocked out as the first rays of sun broke over the horizon. The daylight transformed the warehouse back into just an ordinary building with no hint of the horror from a few hours before. As I walked to my car, I realized something had changed in me. The fear was still there, but it was different now, more like caution than terror. I was learning the patterns, understanding the rules. Each night I survived made me more confident I could handle the next one. I looked back at the warehouse one last time before getting in my car. One more night to go, one more rule to be tested. Whatever came tomorrow night, I'd be ready for it. I sat in my car, staring at the warehouse through my windshield. The building looked completely ordinary in the evening light, just a plain metal structure against the darkening sky. After surviving 4 nights of supernatural encounters, I developed a strange relationship with this place. Fear mixed with curiosity, caution balanced against determination. Tonight would be my 5th night. The 5th rule on Marcos's list: do not accept food from anyone claiming to be from local restaurants. I didn't need to pull out the paper anymore. I'd memorized every word, committed each rule to memory like survival mantras. The pattern was clear now. Each night had tested a different rule. If the pattern held, tonight would bring someone offering food. Let's get this over with, I muttered to myself, grabbing my backpack from the passenger seat. The warehouse was empty when I walked in, just as expected. Marcos was still away on business, leaving me alone again with whatever might come visiting tonight. I went through my now routine security check, testing all the doors, making sure everything was locked tight, checking that the loading bay doors were securely fastened. I clocked in and settled at the security desk, scanning the monitors that showed empty parking lots and the quiet desert beyond. Everything looked normal. I felt my stomach growl and realized I'd made a crucial mistake. I'd forgotten to pack dinner. Between the stress of the previous nights and rushing to get here on time, I hadn't eaten since noon. Great timing, I said to the empty room. Tonight of all nights, I was genuinely hungry. For the first couple hours, I kept busy with inventory work, trying to ignore my growing hunger. The warehouse was its usual sweltering self, and I'd already gone through one of my water bottles. I checked my backpack again, hoping to find a forgotten granola bar or pack of crackers, but found nothing. Around 11, I heard the sound of a vehicle pulling into the front parking lot. I moved quickly to the security monitors, watching as a small white truck with faded lettering on the side parked under one of the lot lights. The camera wasn't high resolution enough to read the text on the vehicle, but it looked like some kind of food truck. A man stepped out carrying a large bag and wearing what looked like a vendor's apron. He moved with a casual confidence, walking straight to the front entrance as if he had been invited. As he got closer to the camera, I could see he wore jeans and a plain white t-shirt under the apron, which had some kind of Mexican restaurant logo printed on it. "Hello," he called out, his voice somehow carrying clearly through the sealed building. "I've got fresh tacos from Estreza's grand opening special. Free samples for local businesses." I stayed at the security desk, watching him through the monitor. He set down his large bag and began unpacking it, pulling out a small folding table that he set up right in front of the glass doors. From the bag came several steaming containers that he arranged neatly on the table. Then came the smell. Somehow, impossibly, the aroma of fresh cooked meat, lime, cilantro, and spices filled the warehouse. The doors were sealed tight. The building's ventilation system was closed. There was no way I should have been able to smell anything from outside, but the scent was overwhelming, making my empty stomach clench painfully. On the monitor, I could see the man's face more clearly now. His features were ordinary enough, maybe early 30s, dark hair, average build, but his smile was wrong. It stretched too wide across his face, from ear to ear in a fixed grin that never faltered as he continued setting up his display. "I know someone's in there," he called out cheerfully. "I've got carne asada, pollo, carnitas, all made fresh just 20 minutes ago." My mouth watered despite my unease. The smell was incredible, seeming to grow stronger by the second. I found myself moving toward the front entrance before catching myself. This was exactly like the compulsion I'd felt with the water woman, an unnatural pull toward something I knew was dangerous. I stayed back, watching through the glass from a safe distance. The vendor looked up, his impossible smile widening even further when he saw me. "There you are," he said, waving enthusiastically. "I was beginning to think no one was here. Come on out, try these tacos, on the house. Best you'll ever have, I promise." His voice was friendly, casual, with just a hint of an accent. If I hadn't known better, hadn't seen the previous entities, I might have thought he was just an over-enthusiastic business owner trying to drum up customers. "No thanks," I called through the glass. "We don't accept food deliveries at night." The vendor tilted his head, that smile never changing. "This isn't a delivery, friend. This is a free sample, grand opening promotion. Just open the door, come try one taco, one bite and you'll be hooked." As he spoke, he picked up one of the containers and opened it, releasing a fresh wave of mouth-watering aroma. Inside, I could see perfectly prepared tacos, the meat sizzling, topped with fresh onions, cilantro, and lime wedges on the side. My stomach growled loudly. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until that moment. The smell seemed to intensify, becoming almost tangible in the air around me. "I'm good," I said firmly, backing away from the door. "You should try the businesses down the street." The vendor's eyes changed then. While his smile remained fixed in place, his eyes turned cold and calculating, watching me with an intensity that hadn't been there before. "You look hungry," he said, his voice still friendly but with a new edge to it. "I can hear your stomach from here. Just one taco. Won't cost you anything but a minute of your time." I shook my head and took another step back. For a split second, something changed in his face, a flicker of something inhuman behind that frozen smile. Then he shrugged, the movement too fluid to be natural. "All right, I understand. You're busy, working hard." He gestured to the table. "I'll just leave these here for when you change your mind. They'll stay hot, I promise." He turned as if to leave, taking a few steps toward his truck. I watched him, wondering if it would really be that easy. Then he spun back around, movements too quick, too sharp. "Actually," he said, his voice dropping lower, "I think you should reconsider." He grabbed one of the containers and threw it against the glass door with surprising force. The container burst open, splattering meat and sauce across the transparent surface. The smell changed instantly, no longer fresh and appetizing but rotten and putrid. "Try my food," he shouted, his voice distorting. The smile remained fixed on his face, creating a disturbing contrast with his now rage-filled eyes. "You need to eat. Everyone needs to eat." He grabbed another container and smashed it against the door, then another. Each impact left greasy stains sliding down the glass. The smell grew worse with each container. What had been mouth-watering moments ago now reeked of decay and rot. "I made these just for you," he screamed, his voice changing pitch, becoming something that didn't sound human anymore. "Special recipe, family secret." I backed away from the doors, moving toward the security desk. The vendor continued his assault on the glass, throwing container after container. The contents no longer looked like food at all. The meat appeared gray and writhing, the tortillas moldy and disintegrating. "You're hungry. I can fix that. One bite is all it takes." His movements became more frantic, more uncoordinated. He slammed his hands against the glass, leaving greasy handprints similar to the water woman from nights before. His too wide smile never faltered, even as he screamed threats and enticements. "Do you know what happens to people who don't eat? They waste away. They disappear. Is that what you want?" For nearly 2 hours, this continued. His threats grew more creative, more personal. He described in vivid detail how hungry I must be, how my stomach was eating itself from the inside, how my body was consuming its own muscles. The worst part was that I was hungry. My empty stomach continued to remind me with painful cramps. I tried drinking water to fill the void, but it didn't help much. By 1 in the morning, the vendor's behavior had deteriorated completely. He paced in front of the doors, movements jerky and wrong, like a puppet with tangled strings. The food was strewn everywhere, covering the glass doors and the concrete outside. What had once looked like tacos now resembled something that had been dead for weeks. "Last chance," he called, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting. "Limited time offer, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." He pressed his face against the glass, that unnatural smile still stretching his features. His eyes were wild now, almost glowing in the parking lot lights. "You'll regret this," he said, suddenly calm. "Everyone gets hungry eventually." Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he began packing up. His movements were quick and efficient as he folded the small table and shoved it into his bag. He didn't bother cleaning up the mess of rotting food smeared across the entrance. I watched on the monitor as he walked back to his truck, movements now perfectly normal, like a switch had been flipped. He drove away, the truck's taillights disappearing into the darkness. The smell remained. What had started as a delicious aroma had transformed into the stench of putrefaction, somehow penetrating the sealed building. I found an industrial fan in the supply closet and set it up near the entrance, trying to circulate the air, but the smell lingered. For the rest of my shift, I stayed as far from the front entrance as possible, focusing on inventory work in the back of the warehouse. My hunger had vanished, replaced by nausea from the rotting smell. When 6 a.m. finally arrived, I approached the front doors cautiously. The glass was clean, no sign of the food that had been thrown against it just hours before. The only evidence of the night's visitor was the lingering smell, which seemed to be slowly fading as dawn broke. I clocked out and walked to my car, breathing in the fresh morning air with relief. 5 nights, 5 rules, 5 entities. I had survived them all by simply following Marcos's instructions. As I drove away from the warehouse, I realized something had changed. The fear was still there, but it had transformed into something else, a sort of grim determination. I understood the pattern now. I knew what to expect. Whatever was happening at that warehouse, whatever these entities were, I had proven I could handle them. And strangely, that realization gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. I got to the warehouse early again the next evening. Though my approach had changed, instead of sitting in my car staring nervously at the building, I walked straight to the entrance with purpose. 5 nights had taught me the rules worked. Follow them, and I'd survive whatever came knocking. The past nights replayed in my mind as I unlocked the front door. The water woman with her black eyes, the robotic job applicant who never blinked, the mailman with his moving package, the taco vendor with his too wide smile and rotting food. Each one had tested me, and each time I'd passed by following Marcos's handwritten rules. My stomach still felt empty after skipping dinner yesterday, so I'd packed extra food tonight, a sandwich, chips, and an apple. No way I'd let hunger cloud my judgment again. I pushed open the door and stopped short. The lights were already on. In the small office overlooking the warehouse floor, I saw movement. Marcos was back. He emerged from the office as I approached the time clock, his expression unreadable. He looked exactly as he had on my first night. Tired eyes, plain work clothes, supervisor badge clipped to his belt. "Martinez," he said with a nod. "Good to see you made it." "Yeah," I replied, punching in. 5 nights now. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or approval. He studied me for a long moment. "Come to my office when you're ready," he said, then turned and walked back up the stairs. I took my time checking the warehouse doors. A habit now, almost a ritual. Everything locked tight, loading bay doors secure. When I'd finished, I headed up to Marcos's office. The small room overlooked the warehouse floor through a large window. Marcos sat behind a metal desk covered with paperwork, a computer humming quietly beside him. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." I sat, watching him carefully. He looked different somehow, less guarded maybe. "You've been alone here for 4 nights, he said, making it a statement rather than a question. "Yeah, and you followed the rules." I nodded. "Every night?" "Every night," I confirmed, then added, "Well, except for that first night when I cracked the loading bay door open. That's when I heard the water woman for the first time." Marcos leaned back in his chair. "But you closed it quickly, and you've been perfect since then." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "Tell me what you saw, what you experienced." I described each night in detail. The water woman with her black eyes and wet handprints, the mechanical job applicant who repeated himself with robotic precision, the nighttime mailman with his shifting package, and the taco vendor whose food rotted before my eyes. Marcos listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. When I finished, he sat forward. "And yet you came back, night after night." I shrugged. "I need the job, and I figured out the pattern." Each night tested a different rule. A loud banging from the front of the warehouse interrupted us. Marcos didn't react, but I turned toward the sound. "Someone's at the door," I said. "I know." Marcos remained seated, watching me. "Go see who it is." I hesitated, then stood and moved to the office window. From here, I had a clear view of the front entrance. A familiar figure stood outside. The water woman, her pale skin glowing in the darkness, her black eyes visible even from this distance. My heart beat faster, but the panic I'd felt before didn't come. This was just another test, and I knew how to pass it. "It's her again," I said. "The water woman." "And what will you do?" Marcos asked, his voice steady. "Nothing. Rule 2, ignore any woman asking for water. Don't acknowledge her presence." The woman began pounding on the glass doors, her mouth opening in those same desperate pleas I'd heard before. But this time, I didn't feel the pull to help her. I turned back to Marcos. "She can't get in as long as I don't let her in," I said with certainty. Marcos's eyebrows raised slightly. He stood and joined me at the window, watching the woman throw herself against the glass. Her movements were just as jerky and unnatural as before, but they seemed almost predictable now, like a program running through its routine. "Most people don't make it past night 3, Marcos said quietly. "They quit, or they break the rules." The water woman's wails grew louder, her voice changing from human pleas to that same metallic screech I'd heard before. I didn't flinch. "I want answers," I said, turning to face Marcos directly. "No more cryptic warnings or vague hints. Tell me what's happening here, or I walk out that door tonight and don't come back." Marcos studied me for a long moment, the water woman's inhuman screams filling the background. Finally, he nodded. "Let's go back to my office. She'll give up eventually." We returned to the small room, closing the door against the noise. Marcos sat heavily in his chair, suddenly looking much older than his late 30s. "This warehouse," he began, "was built in 1952. But before that, this land was part of a large farm. In the 1940s, during the war, there was a labor shortage. The owner brought in workers from Mexico, braceros under the government program, plus others who came without papers." He paused, glancing toward the window where we could still hear the water woman's fading cries. "In 1946, there was a dispute over pay. The workers said they were being cheated, paid less than promised. Things got heated. The owner called in local men to handle the situation. What was supposed to be intimidation turned into a massacre. My mouth went dry. How many? Official records say there was a labor incident with 3 casualties. The truth?" Marcos shook his head. 27 men died that night. Some shot, others beaten to death. They buried them right here, beneath what's now the warehouse floor. No markers, no records, just covered them with lime and dirt and pretended it never happened. The water woman's screams had stopped, leaving the office eerily quiet. "So these things, these entities, they're the workers?" I asked. "Some of them, maybe. Others," Marcos shrugged. "Things like this, violent death and injustice. It creates a wound in a place, and sometimes other things are drawn to that wound, things that were never human." I thought about the job applicant with his mechanical movements, the mailman with the shifting package, the vendor with his impossible smile. "They want to get inside. They want us to break the rules," I said slowly. "But why?" "They want more than to get inside," Marcos said. "They want you. The rules aren't just protection, they're a boundary. Every rule you break creates a connection, lets them get a hold on you. Accept water from the woman, you're bound to her thirst forever. Take that package, whatever's inside takes a piece of you. Eat that food, part of you never leaves this place." I remembered how strongly I'd felt pulled to help the water woman, how genuinely tempting the food had been when I was hungry. "The rules were a test," I said, understanding dawning. "You were seeing if I could resist them." Marcos nodded. "Most can't. I go through 5-6 night shift workers a month. They quit, or worse, they break the rules and—" He trailed off. "Let's just say I never see them again. And you, how long have you been here?" 7 years. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. "Which brings me to this. I need someone reliable for night shift, someone who can handle what happens here." He slid the folder across the desk. I opened it to find employment papers, a permanent position, full benefits, and a salary nearly double what I was currently making. "This is a lot of money," I said carefully. "It's hard to find people who can handle this place," Marcos replied simply. "Those who can are valuable." I looked at the paperwork, then back at Marcos. "What else haven't you told me? What other rules should I know?" "The 5 I gave you cover everything I've encountered. But," he hesitated, "they adapt. They learn. The longer you stay, the more creative they get in trying to make you break the rules." "Creative how?" Marcos looked away. "You'll see, if you stay." I considered the offer. The money was good, better than anything else I'd find in this town. And strangely, I'd developed a kind of confidence here. I understood the rules, the patterns. I could handle this. "What happens during the day?" I asked. "Are they still here?" "No. Whatever power they have fades with the sunrise. That's why the day shift is normal. Regular warehouse work. Regular people coming and going. It's only at night that the barrier's thin." I looked down at the employment papers again. The salary figure jumped out at me, enough to pay off my debts, maybe even start saving for something better. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll take it." Marcos nodded, not looking surprised. "Sign the papers. I'll process them tomorrow." As I signed my name, I heard a faint sound from the front of the warehouse, the last echoes of the water woman's wails fading into the night. "One more thing," Marcos said as I handed back the folder. "Don't get comfortable. Don't think you've mastered this place. The rules work, but the entities, they don't give up. They get smarter, more personal." "I understand," I said, though I wasn't sure I fully did. Marcos stood, signaling our conversation was over. "Get to work. Regular duties tonight. I'll be here until midnight, then you're on your own again." I left his office and headed down to the warehouse floor. The inventory sheets waited on the security desk, same as every night. I picked them up and got to work, falling into the familiar routine of checking stock and organizing shipments. But as I moved through the shelves, I found myself looking more closely at the concrete floor beneath my feet. Somewhere below were the remains of those workers, their unmarked graves sealed beneath layers of concrete and time. I wondered which of them had become the water woman, desperate with eternal thirst. I wondered what else might be down there, waiting for its chance to surface. I'd survived 5 nights by following the rules. I'd accepted a permanent position knowing the dangers. But as I continued my work, a new thought took root. If the entities could adapt and learn, what new horrors might they create to test my resolve? The warehouse seemed quieter now, the hum of the industrial fans the only sound. I checked my watch, hours to go before sunrise. I returned to my inventory count, focusing on the task at hand, pushing away thoughts of what might come next.